2023 May Growth Rings. My name is Chris Diller. I'm a volunteer on CCO's board of directors. It's my pleasure to get to be your host today. For those of you that maybe don't know much about CCO, we're a nonprofit whose mission centers around unleashing human potential through the power of coaching in organizations. We do that through two main programs, our virtual summit, which just wrapped up in April, and our ICF certified ECHO coach training program. If you're interested in learning more about ECHO and what CCO is all about, we currently are accepting applications for our next cohort, which kicks off this fall. I'll post a link in the chat with more details. You can feel free to reach out to me directly. I went through the same coaching program, so happy to share my own experience there too. Now I have the privilege of getting to introduce Johnanna Gans. Johnanna was a speaker at our third annual CCO Summit last month. She's gracious enough to join us again to continue discussing the topic of her summit session, which was around occupational identity. Personally, I'm finding this topic to be incredibly fascinating, and I maybe too often tend to self-identify with the type of work that I do first, even before other identities that I tend to at least espouse as being more important. So I'm still very much wrestling with what this means for me, so excited to dive in a little bit deeper today. For those of you that are interested, this session is eligible for 1.5 SHRM PDCs, so stick around and I'll post that validation code towards the end of our time together today. Johnanna, how are you?
I am doing great and I'm ready to go when everybody else is.
Cool. We've got a crowd. So whenever you're ready.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, share my screen, do the things. Okay, so I am just habitually really into making sure everybody, my PowerPoint, there was a problem with PowerPoint. Of course there was. Great. That's okay. I can just chit chat as we're going here and I can pull all this stuff up again. You know, technology never really works when you need it to, truly. So excited to be back here. Today, we're really, for those of you who came to the summit session, that was a lot of info dump and like a little bit of interaction. We're going to flip it around today. So we're going to do way more interaction and less of the info dump. So we'll cover things, we'll talk about some of the basics, but today really is about you making sense of this information, you digging into what's important to you and what you care about. So let me, it's the autosave. Okay. Hopefully all of my edits were saved. If not, I think this is going to be a pretty forgiving group. So let me give this another shot. Let's see if it works. How about now? I'm pretty sure we have it working. Okay, let me just double check that. Again, man, Chris and I had everything all ready to go too. So, all right, we're in it. All right, team. So again, today's going to be pretty interactive, lots of chit chat time. So to get us going, you will always know that it's your turn to do something when you see this light blue background. So that's my visual communication signal of like, this is a conversation point. So first things that I want to start with is just asking a question of what messages have you heard about pursuing your passions, your hobbies, or your deepest interest is paid employment? So think about everything you hear, everything that's in our cultural conversations, our day-to-day people conversations. What are you hearing? And you can either chat in or unmute yourself.
I've got one that's coming up for me, which is, and I may not get this exactly right, but it's the do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life.
Oh, yep. 100%, Chris. Do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. How about other people? It is possible.
Yeah, a riff on that is do what you love, the money will follow.
Yep. Do what you love, the money will follow, which anyone who's worked in a nonprofit can attest that that's not true. How about other folks? What messages have you heard?
Yeah, mine was similar to Chris's and the fact of, follow your passion and you feel like you won't work a day in your life, or, pursue the passion and everything will be in alignment or follow suit.
Yeah, absolutely. So really centering on that passion component. How about anyone else? How about any of you, have you started doing a hobby and thought, I can turn this into a sellable thing on Etsy? Yeah. Work to live, don't live to work. Ooh, Christina, yes, we love that. Absolutely. So hopefully you're starting to see mostly a trend here. One of the things that I hear really often from people is about this idea of if you love what you do, it's no longer work. And so just to burst that bubble literally right away, we live under late stage white supremacist capitalism. We need jobs. Hard stop. And what's really gets my fire lit, y'all, makes me excited to talk about this, is the way that our cultural systems have really worked to exploit people's passion. So we say things like, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. But my guess is most of us, if we had the choice, wouldn't work 40 hours a week at a job where we have to work with like Nancy in HR that we find frustrating, or like whoever over in that other organization that never answers emails, but you're trying to coordinate event, right? We wouldn't do a lot of this. That's not to say that we wouldn't do really important things for our communities. Me personally, if I didn't have to worry about money, I would open up like a library cat sanctuary where people could just come, talk about books, read, and pet cats with me, right? That's if I had anything, right? And I wouldn't have to worry about money, but we do. And so that's why I want to start with this conversation, because our paid employment structures so much of our day-to-day living. And when we start to listen too much to those cultural messages of follow your passion, your hobby is what you should be doing, right? Those kinds of things, they start to obscure the relationship that we actually need to have to our jobs. Now, people always kind of push back and be like, why are you saying I can't like what I do? Absolutely not. I am telling you, you should definitely like what you do. And it's not the only thing that matters. And you are always more than the work that you do. So that's the message front end. You are always more than the work you do. And if for any reason you're kind of like biting your nails a little bit and being like, oh, I'm not so sure about that, John Anna, then you are in the right place. So, all right, thank you for kicking it off with me. Let's do just a little bit of content before, again, we're going to do lots of conversation today. So let's talk about what is occupational identity and what is strong occupational identity, because they're two very different things, but closely related. So occupational identity, all of us, particularly in the US, right, in the Western world, all of us have an occupational identity connection. Oftentimes for people who are not in mission-driven environments, that connection isn't as strong as it is for folks who do have a mission-driven environment. Occupational identity is normal because work is a governing structure for most of us, especially as adults. It's where we spend the majority of our time. It's where we make the majority of our relationships. It covers the majority of our adult lives, right? At minimum 65, but we all know that's probably going up over time with the retirement system, right? We're looking at a huge component of our day-to-day lives. So for a run-of-the-mill occupational identity, it gets used in two ways when we talk about what is occupational identity. It's about identity differentiation. That's the fancy word for it, which just means I don't cuss like a sailor when I'm presenting, but I cuss like a sailor in my personal life. I differentiate between work self and personal self. My guess is you're going to have a bunch of examples that maybe aren't cussing like a sailor, but are going to be things like I do my hair, I wear different clothes, I shave my beard, whatever it might be. You do things different when you go to work. The other way that occupational identity gets used is to talk about identity development, how we get pushed towards specific career paths based on personality characteristics. So if you're a nerd who loves crunching numbers, you're probably being pushed toward being an accountant or, right, a math or data person. If you're someone who really likes to help others and take care of them when they're not feeling well, as a kid, you probably got pushed toward helping professions like nursing or being a doctor, something along those lines. So that's that identity development, right? There's this connection between our skill sets and what we do for work. So for our run-of-the-mill, everyday occupational identity connection, it often works like this. We always have a sense of self. From the moment we are born to the last breath we take on this planet, we're developing a sense of self across time. What we like, what we don't like, who we are, the people we hang out with, the food we eat, the music we listen to, the NPR stories we click on or don't click on. It's all part of who we are. Our needs then connect in with our sense of self for most people, right? Like, oh, I need health insurance. I should probably figure that out. And that's where we get our jobs. So the job will connect in and fill some gaps in the needs. And oftentimes it's touching our sense of self. It has a connection point, but not always, right? This is that differentiation between a job and an occupation. And I want to make it really clear here and now. A job is never, ever worth less than an occupation. Jobs are things that we have to have under our current cultural system of late stage capitalism. Okay, you need health insurance. You need to pay your rent and groceries and school stuff for your kids or your nibblings or whoever, right? We have to have jobs. And part of those messages we were talking about really try to convince us that we should love our job all the time, but we don't. And that's okay. So for a regular occupational identity connection, these pieces are touching, but that's about it. They're just touching. For folks who really feel connected to their work, their paid employment, these folks, and my guess is most of you are of this variety, I am as well, we have what's called a strong occupational identity connection. I just see the chat. Lego equals architect, which morphed into engineer. Yes, those kinds of things. That's that identity development piece. So for those of us with a strong occupational identity connection, this is when we start to use our paid employment to express our deepest held values, our most important beliefs, or identities that we hold most dear to us. So we have this same sense of self, right? That doesn't change. But what's different for those of us with strong occupational identity is we start to really connect our sense of self with what's called our activism. This is a normal part of the human development process. In our early teens through about our mid-20s, it of course extends further than that, but that's the big years of development. We start to develop value systems and we start to engage the world around us and try to change it to be what we care most about. So like if you're in a friend group and they used like you and your friends used to use sexist jokes all the time with each other, and then you kind of like get older and you learn and you're like, I don't really want to vibe like that. And you start to change and be like, hey bud, that's not funny to me anymore. That's activism, trying to shape your world to reflect your internal values. Everybody does this on some level. What makes strong occupational identity unique is that we stick the occupation as a connection point between our sense of self and our activism. So that paid employment becomes the focus spot of like, yeah, I'm not just doing something like for health insurance. I'm doing this because it's a part of who I am. And that's that differentiation, job to occupation. Jobs we do because we have to. Occupations are when we start to select employment that feels good or meets needs, builds on our skills, or somehow feels important to us, and it's connected to who we are and what we value. So this is where strong occupational identity lives for folks at this intersection of these three components. So my expertise is talking about occupational identity management. And what management means is a lifelong process of building skills that help regulate our emotional, psychological, and even the physical attachments we have to our paid employment, because strong occupational identity is awesome for a bunch of reasons, and it comes with some really big risks. So we have to learn, how do we stay connected to our work without becoming overly attached to our work? So that's what we're going to spend the rest of today talking about. So the other thing that I always think is really important to share here is I have had the pleasure and the benefits of thinking about this topic for about 12 years now. It's a little over, but it's been about 12 years. So I'm practicing with you. I just have a really big head start on most people. So just know that even though, yes, I am an expert and I earned that expertise, I'm still practicing every day. And like I was telling Chris before our session started, one of the ways that like I still can't trust myself is I can't have my work email on my phone. I can't, even when I like think about it, I'm like, I can just turn it on for a second. And that whisper comes, right? I still have to manage that, even though I've been working on this for literally over a decade. So just know, if you make mistakes, if things don't go like you want, if you do something you're like, oh, I said I wouldn't do that anymore, you're in good company. This is a lifelong process. There's no magic behind it. It's just slow and steady. So with that, I want to give you an opportunity to reflect and then share if you're feeling comfy with it, though you don't have to if you're not comfortable. I want you to think about 20 years from today. Just imagine wherever you are. So the date is going to be May 18th of 2043. Just pretend with me. What do you want to look back and be able to say was your professional legacy? Now, some people have some real feelings about the word legacy, is what I've learned when I pose this question. So if that phrasing is like icky to you and you're like, no, thanks, the two questions underneath are going to help you frame up what I mean when I say legacy. What experiences or achievements would be personally meaningful to you? Not a job, not a specific organization, not a title. Think more broadly, right? Because you can do and be many things across your career course. What would make it meaningful? The other way that I ask this question for folks is, what do you want either yourself or other people to say about what it was like to work with you? So I'm going to give you like 3 to 5 minutes to just take some notes, right? Really reflect. And remember, everything we do together is just a first draft. You don't have to have the perfect answer today. This is just to get you going. All right, I'm going to put myself on mute for just a few minutes and let you reflect. What do you want your legacy to be? Okay, so for those of you who are willing or thinking about like feeling comfortable with, is anyone willing to share? What are you aiming for? What would be meaningful to you? What's the kind of legacy you want to leave behind? And you can chat or unmute. Whatever you'd like is welcome.
I could share.
Yes, please.
So for me, it's helping other people achieve goals that they would not ordinarily be able to achieve. That could be internal, like an employee or a mentee, or even external, like a customer unlocking an opportunity that they couldn't have previously achieved without, my assistance or the offerings that we gave them.
Beautiful. Thank you, Eric. Maybe unleashing some human potential. Okay, how about other folks? Anyone else willing to share? What would be meaningful? What do you want people to say about what it was like to work with you?
I had that people felt seen, heard, supported by me, that people felt engaged and energized in spaces with me so that we could make change really for the most vulnerable folks. And hopefully that I modeled, balance and wholeness and humanity, and that we are more than just work. Like by 20 years from now, I'm going to be rocking that.
Yes, Audrey, that, like Chris said, that fits you, Eric. Man, Audrey, that very much fits you as a human from what I know of you. That's awesome. How about, I thought I saw someone else unmute themselves.
Yeah, that was me, Jen Anna. It always, I wrote a whole bunch of stuff, but it all boils down to, as a result of what I did, what I didn't, who I am, or how I am, someone is able to say, as a result of, I was able to. So it's all about building capacity. It's all about encouragement of other people. If I had a little tiny bit of that, my heart is happy.
Oh, Bev, I love that. Anyone else would like to share?
I'll share. This is Sabrina. So I would hope that down the line, people can say that in working with me, they feel empowered to do more of what makes them feel fulfilled in life. I feel like a lot of times we just go through the motions of work, but don't really feel that sense of fulfillment. And I think that feeling fulfilled in life is important towards true happiness. So
Sabrina, the research backs you on that. You are 100% spot on. I love it. Anyone else? I see Jennifer was feeling pretty similar. I think that was to Audrey and maybe Bev. Yeah, Audrey? Okay. Anyone else want to share their thoughts? Christina, hit us up. What do you got?
What's the saying that people won't remember what you did, but they'll remember how you made them feel? That's what I always come back to, is I want people to, feel good when working with me. Like, I just totally switched career paths. And so I was a little lost on like, what do I want my achievements to be? I have no idea. But I just want people to feel good.
Heck yes. I have not yet found anyone who's like, I would like people to feel worse as a result of having known me. So I feel like we're in good company that everybody's on that vibe of like, yeah, I want people to have done better, gone further, built their capacity, felt heard, valued, seen, and good in my presence. That's awesome. So I always ask this question to people. One, because I love hearing about what people care about. That's just me. But two, oftentimes the answers we're giving, especially when I tell you no jobs, no orgs, or no titles, it really pushes you to think about not what you do, more of who you are at work. So when I think about this question, when I think about what I want to leave behind, I want to leave behind a world that is more open, inclusive, and meaningfully sustainable for mission-driven people. I don't care what that looks like. If I continue running my own business for the next 30 years, 20 years, great. If that's joining another org, that's awesome. What I want is to know that we have built a better system for people who are passionate workers to not be exploited because of that passion, but to be honored and held in accountable, sustainable patterns with that work. So, oh yeah, Chris, that you left people better than you found them. Yes, this is how you know this is like a coaching human services vibe. Like we're all in it together. So again, really pushing us to think about who are we outside of work? So rather than saying, I am a coach, I work as a coach. Rather than saying, I am an advocate, I work as an advocate. So starting to hold the job title or the role as less tightly connected to who we are and more about who we want to be at work and beyond work. But that's not my personal life is not my expertise area. Work life is my expertise area. Okay, so let's do just a little bit of like, again, this is going to be content conversation, content. That's like the whole design today. So buckle in. We're doing a little bit of content before more conversation. Thank you everyone for being so interactive. So when we're talking about strong occupational identity, when we have our occupation, activism, and sense of self all overlapping to some degree, what I've found is that there's a lot of really cool benefits when that is well managed, when those are three happy bubbles that have some overlap. So what those benefits are is, I think this is very close to what Sabrina was saying about meaning and fulfillment, that people feel a sense of fulfillment in their world, specifically career fulfillment. When you enter into mission-driven work with a strong occupational identity connection, that is one of the biggest benefits. You know exactly why you go to work. Even on really tough days, oftentimes you go home and you're like, yeah, I still showed up and I was still coaching people, even though it didn't feel great, even though something didn't go quite right. I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. The next big bucket of benefits is higher job satisfaction, right? So across our career course, job satisfaction is actually measured on 3 dimensions: how we think about the work we do, how we feel about that work, and how we actually behave as a result of what we think and feel about that work. So people with higher job satisfaction, when you think about your job, you think of it in more positive terms. When you have those thoughts about your job, you actually feel more positively about your work, or when you're at work, you feel more positively. And that all translates into how you behave, right? We've all probably had the jobs that we really hated where we did silly things, right? I always give the example of like, I stole an inordinate number of industrial staples. When I do not own an industrial stapler, I did it when I was like 20. We have a lot of years between now and when I was 20, right? But I was real mad and I hated the office job I worked at. My boss was a jerk to me. So I constantly was taking a single row of industrial staples on a somewhat regular basis. I didn't do anything with them. I ended up just recycling them. But that's low job satisfaction behavior. Petty things where you're like, I'm taking my control back, right? Higher job satisfaction is the inverse. You're more like, yeah, I'll take on that extra project. I like what I'm doing. That's what we start to see. So when people care about their work, when people find their activism and their sense of self reflected, it's just a higher level of satisfaction in your day-to-day work. We see an increase in people's work ethic and commitment, right? Kept in check, this is an awesome benefit of my work really matters to me. So like, man, I feel tired. I didn't sleep super well last night. I'm still going to get up because I have that one person, that one meeting, that one client, that one that I love to see. I'm still going to go in because I don't want to reschedule with them, right? Those kinds of moments are like, oh, I'm going to give the best that I've got today. So this isn't unchecked of like 100% all the time. You're giving the best that you've got on the day and what you have available. The sense of community and belonging is, I know it's a little lower on the list because it wasn't quite as frequent, but for many people, it's one of the most important. If you're in a job or in an occupation where you're doing some kind of social change work, so racial justice efforts, queer and trans rights efforts, right? Pro-choice efforts, things like that, where you find people who think similarly to you, especially if you haven't been surrounded by those folks before, where you roll up and you're like, holy cow, I didn't think anybody thought about it like I did. I didn't think anybody else was working on this. I just had a client recently who joined a very different field and was like, I didn't even know this was a job, but everybody loves this work. And it's like, yeah, that's the beauty of that community and belonging. We find who we identify as our people, and then we get to be surrounded by them on a day-to-day basis. That leads to a really high level of what's called organizational cohesion, meaning you work together better, you operate together in more friendly and civil and functional ways, and you do better and more work as a direct result of that cohesion, because you're not spending a bunch of time with infighting, because you feel connected to the people you're working with, which is one of our most basic human needs, is community and belonging. The last big benefit is holistic well-being. When your occupational identity is well managed, you have more time and energy for your physical health, your mental health, your social health, your financial health. I could keep going on all the dimensions of health. There's like 8 of them. But the point here is when work has its proper place in your life and you care about that work in a proportional way, you have so much more energy because work doesn't feel like a daily grind. And that leads to longer term sustainability for people, because you can get through the hard days by being like, okay, yeah, this week sucks. It's grant reporting season and everybody hates getting the grant data together, but we're going to get to the other side of this and keep doing the cool work that we're doing. That kind of sustainability where you can be like, yeah, if anyone's ever done grant reporting, whew, what a mess that is. But it might be other things for you. It may not be grant reporting. It might be something else. For me personally these days, it's billing day every day at the end of the month when I have to do billing day. Boy, I hate it, but I get through it because I like what I'm doing. So those are our main benefits. We're going to talk about our big risks because, of course, we need to know the risks. So risks. Number one, this one showed up before any other risk I have found at the time I did research and in the years that I've spent talking to people since. So those three beautiful bubbles, right? Sense of self, activism, and occupation. Over-identification is when those bubbles have started to collapse into one, right? Where your sense of self and your activism aren't quite separate. Your sense of self and your activism and your occupation are bleeding together. It's when we start to build our sense of self and our activism around one of 5 places I found in mission-driven people. Our job role, so that's the daily work we do. The people we serve, whoever your clients are. If you're a coach, it's the people you coach. If you work in direct services, it's the people who are the recipient of services. If you're in grant and funding, the fund and philanthropy world, it's the people who get the money you distribute. So it's whoever your organization is serving. You can be over-identified with your colleagues. If you've ever had a quit buddy, if you quit, I will leave this place the same day that you leave. And the other person says, if you quit, I am out of here so fast. That's a really strong identification with a colleague, right? But it can be across many colleagues. I have also had quit buddies. Again, I'm always practicing this stuff too. It can also be with our agency or our mission, or even the larger movement or field that we're serving. So when we get over-identified in any one of these, and all of us are prone to one or two places more than the others, and it depends on where you are in your career. When I was doing direct services, it was always people served and the movement in the field every time. I could justify just about anything I was doing if I believed it was for people served or the field. Now, because I run my own business, I'm very invested in my agency and mission in a way that I never was before. So what's happening in our lives kind of helps determine where are we most likely to over-identify. Without over-identification, I have not yet seen these other risks show up nearly as often. Do they still show up? Sure, but it's not the same because who you are is not the job you do in the same way. So exploitation, this is at the hands of self or others. So at the hands of self, it looks like things like you take a job that you know will not pay you enough to sustainably live, but you take it anyway and just tell yourself you're going to just have another job or two and you'll make it work, right? That's what it looks like when you do it to yourself. It looks like a lot of other things like telling yourself you don't get to go to the bathroom, or you don't get to have paid time off even though you've got it, or that you should check your email just in case at 8 p.m. because you can't be trusted with your email on your phone, right? Like I have to do that. No, I don't. It can also look like exploitation at the hands of others. So other people taking advantage of your passion, a supervisor who knows you'll never say no because you really care about the work, or colleagues who don't show up in the way that you need them to, or take advantage of that. It can also look like other organizations or funders taking advantage of your team or your passion by doing things like saying, well, if you really want this contract, you will overstep all of your boundaries and get this done in 48 hours. Those are the kinds of exploitations that happen, especially when we're over-identified with our work. Chronic unhappiness and turnover, this isn't at the organizational level. This is at the individual level. That person, who, if they're over-identified, no matter where they go, no matter what job they're at, they are always unhappy, and they will leave that job relatively quickly and turn over to the next job where they find that they are equally or more so unhappy. They often join the organization, feel happy and fulfilled for a little while, and then the cracks start to show up because that's not how I would have handled that case. That's not how I would have done X, Y, or Z. This place doesn't care about us. It is chronic and across many career paths. So that unhappiness and turnover happens at the individual level. Toxic work cultures. So toxic work cultures is a pretty hot topic right now, right? There's a lot of misinformation around it. A toxic work culture is defined as a place marked by strife, infighting, or essentially drama between people that is so great, it impacts the ability to get work done, and it impacts the health and well-being of the workers in the environment. You can have individual toxic people in your life without it being a toxic work culture. The work culture becomes toxic when quite literally all members attached can no longer get things done. When someone is really over-identified, especially a leadership team member, is really over-identified with their work, it can really increase the likelihood of developing a toxic work culture. The last one is an experience of chronic stress, which is always, literally always, the precursor to an experience of clinical burnout. So burnout is, again, one of these words that like a lot of people have started using, and folks who do not have a good grasp on the research of burnout to describe an experience of chronic stress. Burnout is the inevitable conclusion to long-term and chronic stress. When you experience clinical burnout, it results in long-term changes to who you are, your skills and capacities, and your emotional well-being. Depression, anxiety either get worse or develop, and your entire worldview gets pretty tough in clinical burnout, not just stress, burnout. The research on human services demonstrates that it takes an average of 1 to 3 years from the last point of contact with the stressor to recover from burnout. What that means is you cannot stay in the job. Oftentimes people cannot stay in the field because they can have no contact with a stressor. Some of the research in human services has found it is actually can be up to 10 years from the last point of contact with the stressor to fully recover from clinical burnout. What I found in my research was occupational identity related stress was more predictive of burnout in advocates than any other factor previously tested for. So when I tell people occupational identity management is a vital career sustainability skill, I mean it very, very literally. We cannot stay if we cannot manage what work means to us, because it becomes almost just a question of when and no longer if. So this is the real like sad trombone womp womp part of the conversation where it's like, oh, that's rough, John Anna. But we're going to spend the rest of this conversation talking about, so what do you do? How do you build these skills? How do you make sure that you can stay in a job for as long as you want and to leave when you are ready and not because you feel like you have no choice? But before that, we're going to do an exercise together. Chris, do you have the worksheet up or should I grab it?
I've got it in the chat.
You gem. Thank you so much. Okay, so you're going to open up this PDF. You're going to skip to page number 2. Okay. And you're going to answer 15. I'm pretty sure this was the version with 15 questions. Yep. 15 questions for sure. I've made shorter versions for different presentations. So you're just going to answer. You're going to pick one of 5, right? So job function, daily work you're paid to do. So the activities that somebody pays you somewhere, whether it's yourself or others, to do. People served, clients, communities, whoever is the beneficiary of your work every day. Colleagues, people who are fellow employees, if you are a self-employed, right, a solopreneur, as we call ourselves, right, it's going to probably be other folks you work closely with. Your agency or your mission of the agency, or the movement, so your field or system of work. Someone always asks me, John Anna, what if it's 2 of them? I can't pick. It's okay if 1 or 2 answers have 2 responses, but of your 15, aim for 13 to 14 responses with the best fitting connection point. This is not a gotcha exercise, I promise you. This is a self-awareness exercise. So I'm going to go ahead and hush myself for a few minutes. Same deal, throw me an emoji, whatever emoji you want in the chat to let me know that you are done with the 15 questions. And feel free to turn. And David, you're surprised you had a tie. May I ask if you're willing, David, what was your tie?
All of them, each or 3.
I have never had that happen ever. That's amazing. Oh, David, I immediately want to ask you a million questions, but the not live time and being recorded.
No,
That's
I love
amazing.
to. Yeah.
Okay, well, I normally ask people, what did you learn about yourself in this process? And like Bev, yeah, I see that. We are a people group for sure. What,
I
if
didn't
any?
realize how strong of a people person I was. I had 10 that were people served and 2 colleagues, 2 agency mission and 1 movement. I didn't realize how strong it was for me.
Amazing. The people. How about other folks? What did you learn about yourself?
The people element was most strong for me, but I was surprised that job function didn't play more of a role.
Ah, awesome. Thank you, Emily. All right. Anyone else feeling zesty? Want to throw something down?
Kind of what everybody else has said. I was absolutely highest in clients and colleagues, but movement was right there, and then nothing for the title or the agency, which was interesting.
Oh, thanks, Audrey. David, I see you unmuted yourself. What you got for us?
For myself, I expected people served to be number 1. And I thought I would have 0 for movement. But thinking of where I am now professionally in my current work situation, I see why movement was not a 0 now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Y'all, thank you so much for sharing. Chris, I'm going to go ahead and hit stop sharing for us. All right. So the important thing here, right? Because sometimes folks are like, is this a gotcha sort of thing? No, this is now your roadmap. You now know where you're most likely to overstep your own boundaries, because that's what you currently are really drawn to at whatever stage you are in your career. So this is a self-awareness raising tool, not a weapon of any kind. It's not a trick. It's not a trap. It really is to just help you kind of decide, where do I need to spend a little bit more time making sure that I stay in my sustainable and healthy lane and not push too far into unsustainable or harmful practices, because that's what I care the most about, or that's where I connect most strongly at this point in my career. So before we move on, I just want to invite, does anyone have any questions, comments, observations they want to share before we roll forward in this conversation? Just want to make sure we're keeping everybody with us.
Yeah, Janana, I
Yeah.
keep being struck at this stage of my life and your comments that talk about at this stage, because it is very different. And I can see definitely where certain stresses over the past year came from and why it might have sort of surprised me in a way in my usual semi-unflappable state. So thanks. Yeah, pretty interesting.
Of course. Thanks for sharing, Bev. How about other folks, thoughts or questions you want to have answered or just raised before we move on?
I had a question on the movement. I was thinking more of that as with the advocacy and like, how am I trying to make movement in the world around me? I see you're looking more of like industries or the systems that we work in. Can you clarify that for me?
Yes, typically I've used it as like an industry that you are working in, because I work with so many mission-driven organizations and people. But if movement meant something else for you, as long as you used it consistently, that just tells you really good information about how you're thinking about it. Does that help, Jennifer? Beautiful. That's a great question.
I have a question.
Of course.
If this is my roadmap, how do I use it with a 5-way tie?
That's a great question, David. So, as I said, that's a new one for me. However, I think what's important whenever people have ties between areas, it's an indicator that you really want to think about. Thanks for coming, Emily. That you really want to think about, where am I right now? So you might have a project or an event coming up in 2 months that's going to push you really high in one category and let some of the other categories drop off a little bit. Or people have really big life events that happen that radically change what they're doing. So I see some folks are talking about like having left, right, because of burnout and exhaustion or the phase that they're in. I never thought that I would be an agency and mission person, right? Like it wasn't until I started my own business that I was like, actually, no, I really care about this thing being successful. I care about what I do. So, David, I think you can really use the information to just keep general tabs. To on a more regular basis, you might want to redo this point of connection exercise in like 3 months. Is it still all the same? If it's all the same, great. Then you know to just keep keeping tabs in those areas based on your day-to-day work and what's happening in your world around you. Does that help? That's a great question. Beautiful. Okay, thanks, David. All right, job function brought me to my current company. Colleagues, yeah, changes over the time. All right, anyone else questions or something that you'd like to raise before we keep moving forward? Okay, I'm not seeing any quick action. So if you do have questions that you don't want to ask in a big group, please just direct message me the question. Anytime I receive a direct message, I will never attach your name to it, but I might give like a short version of what the question being asked is. Okay, so now here's where we are. We're going to really start talking about like, how do we do this? Right? Beyond just knowing where are areas that we are more likely to over-identify or strongly connect with. Ooh, I see a chat just came through. Had been people for decades. Org sustainability and reputation. Yes. Oh my gosh. Bev, I am deeply passionate about building sustainable organizations. And it's one of my favorite parts of the work that I do is when I get opportunities to do organizational culture development with people and agencies. So like, yes, I vibe on that. Okay. So last caveat here, just on the everyday tools and skills, use what works for you. Modify it if it's not quite right. Listen, I come from a very specific lived experience, right? I'm a white person. I'm queer and figuring out my gender identity stuff right now. Like, it's a lot of stuff. Like, what I build, I try to make as inclusive as possible and live from learned experiences of others. And sometimes it's just not going to be a fit for you. So modify it and then tell me about the modification so I can make it better for other people in the future. And straight up discard anything that is not working. If it's not just like an uncomfortable growing edge, but actually painful, stop doing it. That's not helping you. So remember, you are the expert on your own life. So that's always my caveat here. We're all practicing. So a quick overview. Again, I'm going to really like breeze through these next 2 slides because we're going to talk about the information more at length with you working on stuff rather than me just dropping info at you. So our cycle of occupational identity management for individuals works in a really cyclical way. Whatever our 4 core skills fluency levels are that theoretically we should have been given in childhood and early adulthood, not all of us got those skills developed in the way that we should have. You can always build them as an adult. But wherever we are in our fluency really has a strong hold over how we identify with our work, right? Because those 4 core skill fluencies help us keep our sense of self and our activism in good relationship to our occupation. Our identification with our work determines the boundaries, the habits, and the supports that we need from others. Boundaries are rules. They're not a thing you actually do. It's what you need to be healthy, sustainable, and functional. So things like, I need to leave work at work when I'm done for the day. That's a rule. That's not a thing you do. Habits are the thing you do to uphold a boundary. So if I say that I need to leave work at work when I'm done for the day, You sure as bet your bottom dollar, I've turned my work computer off, I've closed it, and I usually close my office door. So it's a physical visual sign because I work from home. John Anna, leave your office alone, right? So that's the habit I pair with the boundary. And supports are what we need from other people. We can't always support ourselves. We need our community around us to help us. All of those influence the state of our well-being. If we are struggling in these areas, we have less capacity to build our well-being. So that means we have less capacity to work on our 4 core skills fluency. Inversely, if we're working on this stuff, we usually have more capacity because we're in a better state. So we want to always, even 1% better is always 1% better. We are aiming for small, manageable, lifelong changes. The research on human motivation is super clear. It's shaped like a spike and then a big spike down and then another spike up at the end. So think about if you've ever watched runners at the end of a long race. In the middle, they sag pretty bad. It's called a motivational dip. And then when they see the finish line, you see them like speed up very suddenly. Human motivation works the same across types of motivation. So when we're talking about strategies, aim small. Make small motivational dips that are easy to get out of. Build slowly over time. Do not try to change your whole world in a day. It won't last. Just focus on one step at a time. So the 4 core skills that we need are first and foremost self-awareness. Each one of these build on the next one. Self-awareness is built of 2 components. Internal self-awareness, which is the ability to know and understand yourself, to understand your internal world, to pay attention to what you're thinking, to see the patterns in yourself, as well as external self-awareness, the ability to anticipate, understand, and empathize with how others see you, even if you don't agree. That does not include micro or macro aggressions. I'm going to swear, I tried hard not to, but I'm intentionally using this one. Sometimes you run into people who are just going to give you asshole advice. They're going to say something that is based in their own insecurity, their own belief system, their own crappy habits and behaviors. You do not have to empathize or anticipate how that person is going to see you. But everybody else, that's our goal. We want to get good feedback, external self-awareness with folks who are showing up in good faith in your life. It might be challenging. They might not say exactly what you want to hear, but they're there to help you grow. If it is clear someone is trying to just do you harm and not help you grow, you do not have to accept that form of external self-awareness. So we start with we start with self-awareness in occupational identity management, because if we don't know what we're thinking or what we believe or what we value most, we do not understand how our choices are being shaped. That leads to unsustainable connections because we can't manage what we don't understand about ourselves. The next skill, again, we're just doing real brief overview today, is emotional literacy. Emotional literacy is different than emotional intelligence. There's a very long and complicated history in the research around these 2 terms. I use emotional literacy because it's made up of 3 core abilities. The ability to understand your own emotions and to name them accurately. You would be amazed at how few people have this skill, me included. I always have my emotions wheel out. Even as a grown-ass adult is how I describe myself. Even as a grown-ass adult, I gotta have my emotions wheel out sometimes because I don't know what's going on in there. Right? So name and understand your own emotions. Listen to and empathize with the emotions of others, even if you don't agree with them. And to express your emotions productively. Productively means that it advances an idea, a relationship, or a process. So productive emotional expression looks a lot more like hey, bud, that really hurt my feelings how you said that. In the future, what I would like is versus you said this thing and you hurt my feelings and how dare you, right? We're not Niagara Falls screaming at people about our feelings. We're figuring out what am I feeling and what am I asking for a change? That's usually the step we all lose. We're like, I just got to share my feelings. But then what? Productive emotional expression is the next step of being able to say, hey, that hurt my feelings. What I'm asking in the future is. So after that, we need emotional literacy, because when work means so much to us, it can be really hard to keep in line. What makes sense? Is this where I should be putting my time and energy? So our next one is accountability. This is an active process. It's not an end state. This is a lifelong skill we keep working at, of building proportional senses of responsibility to our work and to each of the 5 areas that we connect with. It's about being responsible for our actions and our impacts at work, and choosing to grow and change every day, being able to focus on organizational mission rather than a personal agenda. This requires a radical level of self-acceptance and a willingness to grow, but it re-empowers us to feel in control and happily connected to our work, rather than out of control and like you're just at the tides of change. You're just gonna hang in there for as long as you can like a bronco and then get thrown off later, right? Accountability is about really holding on to what we can control. And last is adaptability, again, as a skill rather than an end result. This is really about being able to adjust what we are doing based on facts, information, and the needs of others around us, as well as ourselves. It's about remaining flexible, having cognitive and emotional flexibility, and being able to see ourselves as having many career options. That's why we started with the legacy question that wasn't about job titles or organizations. The skill of adaptability is being able to say, here's what I'm good at. Here's all the things I could do that would be meaningful to me, rather than where else am I going to do this work? I can't leave this place. This job is my life. Adaptability gets us out of that mindset. It allows us to see and express the self and activism with or without the occupation. So to kick you off and get you, no, I'm not kicking you off the line. That was a terrible phrase. To get you started in your journey, we're going to take just a few minutes. This is the list that I have of the most commonly used values for mission-driven people that I work with. You might not see one of your values listed here. That's okay. You write down whatever values are most important to you. Your job right now is to choose the top 3 or 4 values that are most important to your working life. A value is a principle or standard that influences how you act and what you identify as most important to you. There is no wrong answer. It could be anything. Your only job right now is to pick 3 to 4 and then give yourself just a couple of notes on what that would be defined as for you personally. Not a dictionary definition, not what your job defines it as, what you personally think of that value as. I'm going to give you about 5 to 7 minutes because I want to make sure that we can keep moving forward. But this is just to get you going, because the first step of self-awareness is understanding the values that drive our decision-making every day. So I'm going to hush up and let you work. Okay, you might still be working through. That is a-okay by me. Again, this is a process that I take clients through that takes a couple months usually, because our first draft is rarely ever the most accurate one. People even find that the values that they choose sometimes shift, because they might choose something like optimism, but they actually realize that it's really about enthusiasm. Or someone chooses reliability, but it's actually much more about stability for them. So what I encourage you to do is keep playing, literally play with this, F around and find out, right? Mess with it, touch it, think about it, compare your actions and be like, how did I demonstrate kindness, justice, and community or respect today in my actions? And if you find it's not quite a fit, find what is that fit. This is part of a much longer process, but what we want to do is start using our values as a system to keep us sustainable. So if, for me, I have integrity, collaboration, and curiosity. If I let my curiosity go into overdrive, I will forget to collaborate with people because I just want to know the information and I'm like in a deep dive and I forget to come up for air and talk to people about it. If I let my integrity take the wheel too hard, I stop staying curious and I get a little self-righteous from time to time of like, no, this is about my integrity, rather than being like, is it about my integrity? How can I remain curious? So we can use our values as a checks and balance system to work together for us in occupational identity management, because we all fall too hard on our values from time to time. Our cultural script really insists to us right now that you can't ever go too hard on your values. Values are the way. But what the research and human experience actually shows is we can get too over-identified with our values that we stop staying in community with one another, that we start to use our values as a weapon or a shield rather than as a helpful set of tools and a bridge to other people. So we want to keep our values in that space, especially in mission-driven work, because you often came to mission-driven work for the values that you got to express. That's why we want to know what they are for us and how they function in our everyday life. So thank you for sharing your values. I have this question called the career miracle. I'm going to just pose it. This will be a thinker question later because it's really important to me to make sure people have time for questions and wrap up. So imagine a miracle has occurred tonight. Something miraculous, magical, unexpected. It's caused one change, just one change. Again, one, people always want to try to add in like 4 or 5 changes. One change that's going to fix a bunch of issues in your professional life with positive ripple effects. So you're going to go to sleep tonight. This miracle one change is going to happen, but it's going to impact a lot of places for you. What's the very first thing you'll notice in your day tomorrow? Because you're going to sleep tonight. The miracle's I didn't know if you all knew this, but at this Growth Rings, I'm actually also guaranteeing a miracle tonight. Just kidding. Please don't hold me accountable. Please don't sue me for that. But what's the first thing you're going to notice tomorrow? What will be immediately in your awareness of like, whoop, whoop, whoop. That's different. I expect you to make those kinds of weird little cat noises too. The next question is very specifically, how will your working life be different now? What I tell people is when you're answering this, pay attention to what you respond with. Is it about the people you work with? Is it about what you actually do? Is it about the field you're in? These answers often correlate pretty strongly with areas of over-identification and connection points. Or the inverse. So if you're like a, it's all for the people I serve, and then you find out that the job role, you would actually just change your job role. You just like the people you work with or work for and help, support, empower. You don't actually like the job you do. So look for your own trends and themes in however you answer it, because it's going to give you really meaningful insight into what matters most in your working life right now and where your biggest pain point is. It gives you information, always a tool and a bridge, never a weapon or a shield. So here's my wrap-up slide for y'all. What does sustainable occupational identity management actually look like? And this is one of my favorite images from someone who goes by the handle Taurus QueerX, right? Empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. In mission-driven work, especially y'all love balance, growth, inclusion, community. It's real easy to forget. We got to contain ourselves in that process too. So what does this mean? It's when we start to really see work as just one component of who we are or what we do. I always encourage people to use the language of, I work as a coach, I work as an advocate, rather than I am. It makes you one piece of who you are rather than all of your identity. Find lots of outlets for your sense of self and your activism. Get a hobby or two that has nothing to do with your job, nothing to do with the work stuff you do, nothing. That was one of the hardest learning lessons I ever had, was I had to figure out what I like to do in my free time if it wasn't watching documentaries about domestic and sexual violence. Turns out way harder than I thought it was going to be when I left the field. So find many opportunities for who you are and what you care about. Practice each of your 4 core skills. They work in conjunction. We generally try to work one at a time to make it more manageable, but we're always working on them all the time. And most importantly in that, prioritize self-preservation. I started this by talking about that we live under white supremacist late-stage capitalism. Your job will never love you back. We are seeing unprecedented levels of layoffs, and those organizations don't look twice at the process. You have to be more than your job, and your life is more valuable than any work you will ever do in this lifetime as paid employment. So make sure you preserve you. Start learning how to practice giving and receiving growth-focused feedback. This is a coaching-based event, so a lot of us are kind of already on that vibe and interested in it, but it still can be hard to ask for or give to others. So keep working on it. Focus on that growth rather than proving your value. A lot of us in mission-driven work with strong occupational identities, we use our jobs to prove our worth or our value. Well, so-and-so client said I was great, therefore I am great. Rather than, they said I was great. That's a strategy that I know I've used in the past. I think I'm going to work on this other thing. That's really great feedback, not who I am. Make sure you're stating and upholding your boundaries, your habits, and the supports that you need. This is the big one. Most of us have boundaries that we hold very loosely as like this thing that maybe kind of we do, but we disregard really quickly. When we separate out a boundary from the habits, it makes it real clear when we're not holding up those boundaries, because the habits are what make the boundary real. And then finally, make sure you are holding just expectations of your peers, your supervisors, and your organization. When I say just, I mean it's in a proportional context. Your peers will not be your best friends. Your supervisors aren't there to hold your hand through every life event. Should they care about you? Hell yes! And they're not your therapist. They're not your best buddy. And if they are your best buddy, that's probably a conflict of interest, and you're maybe not getting the growth that you need from your supervisor. So we should talk about that further. Please hit me up. And your organization will never meet all of your values. It will never reflect back to you exactly who you are unless you made your own business. That's why I made my own business. I wanted to see everything about me reflected back to me in the best form that I could offer it. But if you work for anybody, any other organization, if I ever hire another person, that's going to have to change, because the org can't be everything to you. So make sure to balance those things. So questions, wrap-ups, anything you want to talk about. I always like to invite a response to one of these. What did you learn, or an insight you got about yourself? Or what's an action you're going to take based on what you learned today? And again, open to questions. I know we've only got a couple minutes. If Chris is able, I can stay up to like 1:40. But if Chris, you got to bounce, that's totally okay. You can bounce. We got to.
No, I can stay and hang out. That'd be fun.
Okay, wonderful. What do y'all got for me? And if you got to go, you got to go, and you can always catch me later.
I think for me, articulating what that legacy question was helpful. I don't think I'd ever phrased it the way that I phrased it to myself today. I think I had a good sense of it, but like the phrasing here, I think was helpful.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. How about other folks? Any questions or things that you noticed?
I like the exercise about defining the values and this idea that it's not sort of a one and done. It will evolve and grow as you kind of learn and think about it more. So I really like that one.
Yes, it's all a process. It's all just a crappy first draft most of the time. Thanks, Matt. Okay, yeah, y'all gotta go. I get you. I get you. See you later. Any other questions or things that you want to chat through? Survival of the org and the mission. Yeah, spend time on your career miracle. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, John Anna, I just want to say thank you again. I mean, I heard such great things about the summit presentation. I'm so glad you were able to take a deeper dive with us today. And I think it's something that flirts around the background of people's consciousness, but the way that you bring it forward and make it an explicit thing to notice, to assess, and then to adapt and take action on is enormously healing. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Thanks, Bev. I feel that way, but it's always the best compliment that I can possibly get in this lifetime is that what I shared helped another human being in some capacity. That's my legacy I want to leave behind as well. It's like being there and showing up for others and helping them live a better, happier life as a result. Well, thanks, Bev. Thanks, Eric, for coming.